bit of a scoop for your mans over here, because over the weekend, I learned that Mike Leach's Hall of Fame candidacy is going to be discussed by the College Football Hall of Fame and the folks that are responsible for governing the College Football Hall of Fame induction process. That is the National Football Foundation. Full disclosure to you, I vote in the National Football Foundation's Super 16 poll the last year and going into this year. Grateful to be a part of it. And you'll also know that the history of this game is very, very important to me. As a matter of fact, it's a theme of the show and one of the things that we try to lean into because you like to hear me talk about it. So let's lean into it. So over the weekend, we learned, or not even over the weekend, on Monday, we learned that the 2024 class will be loaded because it turns out there are a lot of great players and great coaches in the College Football Hall of Fame, selection process. Because what's wild about this is this year alone, there are over 200 players that are up for selection. And there are, I think, over 40 coaches that are up for selection. And that's no easy feat, right? Because to be up for selection for, say, Mike Leach and, head coach, there's a number of things you got to do first. So the first one that you have to do to be even up for nomination, this is to say a coach, an SID, sports information director, athletic director of communications, needs to put you up, needs to say to the College Football Hall of Fame and the National Football Foundation, we believe this person is worthy of being a Hall of Famer. Now, do they meet the threshold for induction, right? So for the coaches, that means that you have to have won 60% of your games, been a head coach for 10 years. And then if you are or if you're under the age of 75, you have to wait 3 years before you can be eligible for the Hall of Fame, right? Now, in the case of Mike Leach, kind of getting hairy because when Mike Leach passed away in December, he had been a head coach for 10 years. And he would have had to wait, still has to wait the 3 years to be eligible for induction because he wasn't 75 at the time of his passing. But the one that really got underneath my skin and the one that frankly got a lot of folks going was when I learned that 60% was the threshold for even being up for nomination. And Mike Leach has won 59.6% of the games he was head coach. This is at Texas Tech. This is at Washington State. This is Mississippi State. And there are lots of different ways to go at this, right? What happens if you give them a couple more years? What happens if you take away last year? All these things come into play. But I went ahead and did some reporting, and I learned that Mike Leach in particular is going to be discussed because the National Football Foundation and the College Football Hall of Fame recognize that Mike Leach is exactly what the sport is about. We love that man. I personally love that man. And I think the quote that I have in our story at foxsports.com goes like this: despite being one of the most intelligent and entertaining coaches in the sport with a winning percentage that's bowl game eligible, 59.6, 60%, 6 games, Leach is not eligible to be nominated for the Hall under current rules. But the National Football Foundation oversees the Hall and is taking a look at its rules, specifically the one that might prevent Leach from reaching the ballot at all. And then a source told me there are meetings coming up where the issue of Mike Leach will be discussed. This also reminds me how much I love a teleprompter because I'm a much better writer, guys. It just happens to be that you want to hear me talking about this stuff off the cuff and going down the rundown. All that to say, I think they're going to make way for others to jump on board with Mike Leach getting into the Hall of Fame when it's time for him to be eligible in 3 years. I mean, Archie Manning even talked to Sports Illustrated about how there needs to be a special dispensation for Mike Leach because he is Mike Leach and all those things that entails. For me personally, Mike Leach didn't know me from Adam and did me the kindness of extending me an interview right after Alex Grinch became the defense coordinator at OU. And I was doing a YouTube show out of a corner of my bedroom that still has the bathroom sink in it. Okay. I was in an efficiency apartment doing that show. And Mike Leach was on vacation in Key West. And he took 15 minutes to talk to me about Alex Grinch and hopping hens and just what kind of basketball players these hens could be. It's one of my favorite interviews of all time. It also was one of the first times that someone had been kind to me in this space when I really was looking for a win. And those sorts of kindnesses don't often happen. They're few and far between. So you remember them and they imprint upon you when they do happen. And not to say that, Mike Leach was also a great offensive coordinator at Oklahoma before he was head coach at Texas Tech. This also gets into a larger point that, I pick a fight with the National Football Foundation and the College Football Hall of Fame for how it goes about nominating players that might be eligible for selection in the College Football Hall of Fame. So I mentioned there's a high threshold to meet for coaches. For players, it's much the same. For players to be eligible for even nomination for the College Football Hall of Fame, they have to have been an All-American as nominated or as assigned by one of the NCAA selectors, which include, among others, the Associated Press, the AFCA, the Sporting News, and I believe the Football Writers Association. And I'm missing one, I'm sure off the top of my head. But if you haven't been named an All-American by one of those 5, then they just don't count you as being a first-team All-American. That's the point. You got to be a first-team All-American. And this first came to me when I was discussing Chuck Ely. Chuck Ely was a quarterback at Toledo in the late 60s, early 70s. And he was undefeated as a starter in 3 years at Toledo. And he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play in the Canadian Football League. But he was not in the College Football Hall of Fame. And I want to know why. Turns out he was a first-team All-American by the Football News, but the Football News was not one of the NCAA selectors, so the College Football Hall of Fame and National Football Foundation did not count it. And you also get a finite amount of time to get in on the regular ballot, which again, I say has over 200 people on it. We're talking about close to 250 people, including coaches on this thing. So that means that you have 50 years on that ballot before they just take you off. And because Ely had played more than 50 years ago, he was going to be taken off of the ballot. And he wasn't going to get in the first place, right? And then he was never on it to begin with because Football News and First Team All-American. Well, the Veterans Committee at the National Football Foundation and for the College Football Hall of Fame has discretion to look past those 50 years to see if there have been any oversights. And it turned out that the year after I wrote about and talked about right here on this show that you listened to, what Chuck Ely had done and what his Hall of Fame resume looks like, he was selected for the College Football Hall of Fame. And I got the privilege of hearing him call me to tell me thank you for taking on his story, which is, again, it's one of the reasons that you do this job. It's one of the reasons why journalism matters, right? Every now and again, you get to do some good and you get to lift up a story that is meaningful. And I'm the kind of person that really does lean into the history and the understanding of a place like the College Football Hall of Fame, which ain't for players as much as we want it to be, right? I want to see Chuck Ely get inducted while he's still alive so he can get his flowers, because that's important to me. But it's also important to me that the College Football Hall of Fame is a reflection of us, just like language is, right? On fleek makes it into the dictionary because enough people say on fleek, right? Which is another way of saying stylish and perfect. But if it is not going to be a reflection of us, then what is a reflection of? Because frankly, there have been over 5.6 million people that have played college football, and just over 1,000 of them are in the College Football Hall of Fame. But there are quite literally hundreds of millions of people that are college football fans. And we are the people that are going to enter the College Football Hall of Fame, look and gawk and say, oh my God, that's what it's for. So to leave out a guy like Mike Leach doesn't feel right. But I'll give you another example of how this goes when we're not talking about Chuck Ely. Talk about Trevor Lawrence, somebody that you know very well. So Trevor Lawrence was only a first-team All-American one time while he was at Clemson. And it was the very last year he played football at Clemson. That's also the year where Mac Jones was the guy for the first-team All-American for nearly everybody else but the Football Writers Association, which is another way of saying the Football Writers Association was paying attention. And I, again, full disclosure, I'm a member. Which is to say that they knew that if they didn't make Trevor Lawrence a first-team All-American, that we would not be able to talk about Trevor Lawrence being on the ballot to get into the College Football Hall of Fame. That means the guy that was first to lead his program to a 15-0 record and a national championship in the college football playoff era. The guy that became the first true freshman since Jamel Holloway in 1985 to lead his team to a national championship, and one of the best quarterbacks of the last decade would not even be on the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame because he happened to play when Kyler Murray was the best quarterback in college football in 2018, right? 2019 is Joe Burrow, and 2020 is Mac Jones. We have reached a point where, yes, we might have more first-team All-Americans than we got slots for first-team All-Americans. So I think it's a stupid rule. I understand why they make that the threshold, because then everybody is going to try to put up their person for the College Football Hall of Fame. But frankly, that's your job when you are governing who gets to be nominated and who gets to be selected. So if you get hundreds of thousands of applications and you still can miss on guys like Mike Leach and Trevor Lawrence, I don't know what to tell you, right? I'm sure that I'm also raising an alarm that some people at the National Football Foundation know about, but I'm sure you didn't, right? Because it only matters that you see these guys are nominated and you see what I see. Everybody on the list can go. Everybody on the list was a superhero at their respective program in school, right? I really love that. It was another opportunity for me to just, once again, remind people that Mike Leach, one of a kind and unique, and that there are enough people that would like to see him in the College Football Hall of Fame, that 4/10 ain't really going to be what gets him out. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.